The Scott Grant Show is brought to you by Standfast Asset Management.
Hi, I'm Billy Bussard, and I love listening to The Scott Grant Show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Scott Grant Show. And I'm here today in Standfast Studios with my co-host, Jennifer Price. How you doing?
Hi, Scott. I'm doing great.
How are the kids doing? How's school going for them?
Well, they're learning that
Are they in school today?
Today they have been shut down.
Oh, the school shut down. So that's good news for you, right? You like that?
Well, they think that every time it's shut down due to possible exposure, that it's spring break. So we have to go through about 24 hours of trying to quell this "it's spring break" attitude.
So they don't want to do any work, is what you're telling me.
Transitions are difficult.
And this is the second time they've transitioned, right?
Maybe 3 or 4.
Has it been that many?
It just feels infinite. Yes.
All right. Well, we have an exciting guest today, Jimmy Midyette. Midyette, right?
You got it, Midyette.
So did they call you Jimmy the Jet when you were growing up?
No, they just called me Jimmy. I actually had a nickname when I was growing up that was a family nickname that I'll say now because it's kind of funny, but my grandparents and my parents called me Chubbs. So,
okay.
So because I had these cheeks, and I think I still have them.
Yeah, you got a nice round face. You look happy and friendly, I think, naturally.
I hope so. That's nice.
And since you're running for office, right? I mean, that could come in handy. So you're running for clerk of courts.
That's right. I'm running for Duval County Clerk of the Courts.
Please tell me, what is a clerk of court?
Okay, clerk of court is the person that is elected by the residents of the county to help run their courthouse, to help staff the criminal and the civil divisions with court staff, to manage the jury selection process. If you've ever gotten that dreaded letter, to come downtown to be seated for a jury.
I've never been asked to serve on a jury, never a long time.
Uh-oh.
Maybe once.
We've just summoned it.
Yeah, I can get out of it. I'm sure I can get out of it.
Well, you never know. We'll see how things go on November 3rd.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things, and then they're also responsible, the clerk staff. Really, you elect a clerk to kind of manage it, but then really the real work is done by the hundreds of employees that work in the courthouse. And they help pro se, self-represented people file papers, and they do clinics, and they do all sorts of sort of public interest things that help the residents. And those are the things that happen. It's just one of those, we call it a constitutional officer position in Jackson or in Florida, and this is the one for Duval County.
You have a pin on your lapel. What is this?
Oh, it's a pro bono service pin. I'm a lawyer, and I've given a fair amount of my time away over the years helping people in need, whether they're victims of foreclosure, victims of domestic violence, or people who were facing eviction or needed help getting government benefits, food stamps or what have you. So I've done a lot of public service over the years, and I love it.
That's great. Now, you're a lawyer. Where'd you go to law school?
I went to law school at FSU out in Tallahassee.
Okay. So we're here.
Go Noles, right?
Lee Lockett is a good friend of mine. He's an FSU attorney as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'm a lawyer. I don't know if you knew that, but I'm a lawyer. I went to Rutgers in Newark.
Okay.
Where Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a professor. Her first professorial position was at Rutgers School of Law. And her picture was up. We used to look at it. And that was back, before she became, I think, notorious.
Right, and she certainly was notorious for many years. She and I have an employment area in common. She was a staff attorney at the ACLU for some time, and I was also a staff attorney at the ACLU for some time. Just a couple of years, but she actually founded a big national program up there and made a lot of good change before becoming a judge.
Well, I imagine a lot of people around here don't care for the ACLU, but I do. I'm a big fan of the ACLU.
Help me out with these acronyms.
The American Civil Liberties Union.
Okay.
They're a law group that goes back 100 years, and it's interesting that people, maybe don't like the ACLU, but
Well, I think conservatives a lot of times will attack the ACLU. I know Actually, when I was in law school, I worked in the Constitutional Law Center. We did some work on getting a Christmas crash removed from City Hall, someplace in New Jersey, and yeah, people were not happy with us.
Well, the ACLU is pretty famous for representing really all parts of the ideological spectrum. I mean, they literally
Right.
represented the Klan
In Skokie, Illinois, yeah.
That's right. Because they see, and I'm not there anymore, so I won't speak for them, but they see the Constitution as being something that is sacred for all people, whether it's, the KKK or, maybe Antifa now, or they represented the Proud Boys in Virginia after that Charlottesville thing. Yeah, they've been on all sides of the political spectrum because they just hold the Constitution as being the most important part of our government, and I can't disagree with that.
Do the Nazis, or the Klan, it was the Nazis, wasn't it, in Skokie?
I guess it must have been the Nazis.
The American Nazis? Do they still march, do you know?
I don't know. I mean, in my opinion, they do, but they call themselves different names now.
Well, I meant more, do they still march in Skokie? Because that was just that annual event at one point that was always a touchstone for
I
them.
haven't heard of it in many years. I don't think so.
But the ACLU represented them and then represented a number of liberal causes. What are some famous ACLU cases?
Oh gosh, there's so many. There's I believe the ACLU was involved in Times versus Sullivan, a free speech case.
Right.
They were instrumental in some of the desegregation matters, along with the
Did they do Loving?
The NAACP did Loving,
Okay.
but the ACLU was there, and that continues. I mean, there are current cases that the NAACP Legal Defense Fund will be involved in, that the ACLU is also involved in the Southern Poverty Law Center.
So, but in a nutshell, everybody has rights, and including the right to free speech and the right to their day in court.
Absolutely, the right to free speech, the right to their day in court, the right to be free of government, unreasonable search and seizure, the right to be free of, police brutality, and all the things, that are in the headlines today.
And you've been in court defending those rights for people.
I've been in court defending those rights for people. Two of the cases that I worked on most extensively during my time with the ACLU were the defense of what we used to call Amendment 4, the Voter Restoration Amendment, helping returning citizens.
And were those recent cases?
That's a very recent case.
Okay.
That case is still going on.
Talk about that. It's intriguing.
So in 2018, of course, Florida voters, I believe it was just north of 65%, by a margin of 65%, voted to extend the franchise, the right to vote, back to returning citizens, formerly incarcerated, former felons. There's all sorts of ways to put it. But the point is that for most felons that had paid their debt to society, they were to be restored to the voting rolls. Automatically, basically.
And honestly, I was surprised that passed.
I wasn't. I mean, it was a huge. I was involved as kind of an organizer back then on it. Whenever we were in the process of gathering signatures and getting it on the ballot, the polling was through the roof, and it was a bipartisan approval because.
Well, and there were like 12 amendments. We passed 10 or 11 of them.
We did, and many were not so great, but this one got.
I took that as a sign that people, while divided on party, I mean, almost straight down the line, 51-49 in the state of Florida, that we collectively wanted change. That's what I took away from that, because we passed some things, and I had to think to myself, I barely understood this, and I did research, and a lot of average voters can't possibly know what it is that they're voting for.
Well, what annoyed me that year, 2 years ago, was that the Constitutional Revision Commission had come along and put a bunch of amendments on, and they bundled them in such a way that maybe one thing had something good, but something bad. I can't necessarily quote them all back to you.
No, I remember them, and you're right. I mean, they were multiple bundles of stuff. And I know a couple people have come to me this election and asked me about the amendments again and said, they were so confusing, you got to help me. I said, well, they're not as confusing this year.
They're less confusing. I'll just plug the League of Women Voters. League of Women Voters have put out some good resources on all 6 of the constitutional amendments that are on the ballot, and they do a great job.
And so you worked actively to restore voting rights to felons in the state of Florida.
That's right. That's the substance of the lawsuit, because it was the will of Florida voters. And so when the legislature passed what was called in that legislative year Senate Bill 1066, I think it was, that put up some roadblocks and made it more difficult for those we call them returning citizens, for those returning citizens to get their rights back. That was the point at which we had to sue, and we did file that lawsuit within like a day.
And how did that suit come out?
Well, it's been winding its way through the courts. It's
Right,
still
okay.
there. We got a really good result in the trial court. Then it went to the appellate court in Atlanta. We got a good result, and then they heard it on the bank, so we got a bad result, and now I suspect it will be bound for the Supreme Court at some point. I don't know that, but that's my guess.
Yeah, that sounds like something, at least in most times, that the court would want to take up, that they would want to give cert or certiorari to that.
I have a very interesting question. So, a former criminal, he's been in society, he's been owing a debt of, let's say, $1,000 in restitution for 10 years. What does he do to restore his voting rights?
So what happens is, that's where the legal question is. Some of us believe that once he has finished his term of imprisonment and any term of parole afterwards, that should be enough if he is making a good faith effort to repay the debt, and does not have the financial wherewithal to pay it at once. That person should at that point be eligible to register and vote. The other side says, well, no, that he needs to pay off his $1,000.
And is that because they just want that person not to vote, or?
I would hate to question the motives of the backers of Senate Bill 1060. Yes, I think that's what it is. I think their concept is the fewer people who vote, the better for their side, and my concept is the more people who vote, the better for my side.
Well, and I think voter turnout is a good thing, but we all know that low turnout tends to favor the Republican Party, nationally and here in the state of Florida. So, did Bloomberg pay those guys debts?
He has. So there is an organization, a nonprofit organization called the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. Desmond Meade is at the head of that organization. He's well known. They have been raising money from athletes, big money folks, including Mayor Bloomberg, and they are helping assist paying off the fines and fees of the folks who can't afford them. So that is a thing that's happening. It's still happening. People are being returned to the voting rolls because of that nonprofit, public interest effort on behalf of Desmond Meade and Mayor Bloomberg.
And I heard that the Attorney General was looking into whether that was a crime in the state of Florida. Is that true?
General Moody is looking at it. I've read the statutes that they've referenced. I don't see anything that indicates they're paying people to vote or to register to vote. I mean, it has to be a thing of value to another person, and my clean balance sheet that allows me to vote is not of cash value to anyone. So I frankly think that's just the smoke screen. They're throwing up things to try and maybe put a pause on that effort, because they've helped something like 32,000 people pay their fines and fees. And as the future clerk of the Duval County Courthouse, I'm excited to hear that there are resources coming in to pay the fines and fees, because that goes right back into the operations of the courthouse.
I'm curious, does the former criminal actually just get a check sent to him in the mail?
No, that would be nice, I guess.
Would they actually then pay their fines?
I think they would. No, that actually is a great distinction. They do not get a check sent in the mail. The payment is made directly to the depository at the courthouse.
Oh, and so they get a letter saying, "Congratulations."
Right. If they can. And part of the problem in Florida is the various databases that track this stuff are not exactly in tune with each other. So the Department of Corrections may think they owe one number, and the local clerk may think they owe a different number, and the court file may say it's a different number. So the first and most important thing is to figure out what the right number is, and then yes, the payment comes to the courthouse, not to the person, and then that person is then clear to register and vote.
Well, I've been I write a lot. I don't know if you've read anything I've written, but I do write a lot of history. And I wrote something recently, and it's not done, and it's a bigger piece, but was talking about a speech that Jimmy Carter gave in 1974 called the Law Day speech to the distinguished alumni of the University of Georgia Law School.
Okay.
It's this famous speech. It's the speech that launches Carter to the presidency.
Mhm.
But one of the things he says in there is that the law is tougher on poor people.
It's true.
And there's this quote in there. He says, "I doubt that 90% of the crimes in the state of Georgia are committed by poor people, but that's the part that are in jail." And in a period of time where we're very adversarial and angry, it kind of reminds me that looking out for the weak members of society is a big deal.
It's a big deal to me. I mean, if it weren't the right thing to do, we all have an oath of attorney. We all say that we won't reject a cause, that's righteous. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, due to the inability of the person to pay. I'm a Christian, so I actually have a moral belief that goes further even than my obligations under the law, that we are to provide for the least of these, that we are to welcome the stranger and feed the hungry and heal the sick, and that we're called to do that, by a really important person who lived 2,000 years ago. So I try to follow his teachings with regard to that, and I bring that to the law. And having worked, for so many years at legal aid, I have, I've lived that.
I really admire that. You're the champion of the less fortunate in our society. That's very admirable.
Yeah, I like him, and I'm not endorsing. Not endorsing,
And
but I
so
really
now
like him.
you're running for. And do you think you can make a difference?
I think I can. I'll tell you, Scott. The truth is that a lot of what the clerk of court does is prescribed by the state constitution and the statute book and stuff like that. There's not a lot of wiggle room, but where there is an opportunity to do good, you can really do good. You can make sure that only legal aid for example, can only help 1 out of 5 people who need legal assistance, and that's somebody facing eviction, facing domestic violence, an abuser, domestic violence case, a divorce. Only 1 in 5. So that then shifts to the clerk of court to provide a self-help center. So that is something that will be huge for me when I'm the clerk. I will have the best self-help center in Florida for people who are not able to afford a lawyer, because justice belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford it. And we have public service like a clerk of court, like a self-help center.
You just sounded like Jimmy Carter there, by the way.
Yeah.
From this speech, which again, it's Hunter Thompson covered it. So it was a huge speech. It was on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine.
I'm going to check that out. I haven't encountered it, but we Southern Jimmies, we tend to get things right.
But you sounded like him just there. Whatever he just said, it touched me. Keep going.
Well, that's essentially it. That to answer your question, there's not a lot of wiggle room in what you can do, but the little wiggle room there is, you can make a tremendous difference in the lives of everyday people who interact with the court system, and that's a lot of people.
Is there anyone that's opposing you?
Well, I have an opponent.
Okay.
And he's worked at the courthouse for about 8 years now, and this courthouse, this clerk's office, I'll just say it, they haven't done anything special to help the returning citizens. They haven't tried to get those figures on the legal financial obligations. They haven't done anything to help get that out there for the people. They've actually denied the right to get married to people by closing the courthouse chapel.
Oh.
So it was a big thing for many years that you could go down to the courthouse and get married. But as soon as marriage equality became the law in Florida back in
Whoa. So right now, if I want to go get married in Duval County, I can't get married at the courthouse.
That's correct. You can get your marriage license at the
Right.
courthouse, but we used to have, and then when we built the brand new courthouse, we had this nice wedding arbor
Right.
as part of it where people could go and just get married. And now, since 2015, they closed it. Now they store chairs in there. So you cannot go to the courthouse and get married. You have to go to the courthouse, get your wedding or your
And you're
marriage
saying that
license.
they closed that chapel because they didn't want to perform same-sex marriages.
That's correct.
Wow.
Did they say that?
At the time, the current clerk, my opponent's the number 2 to that clerk. The current clerk said in the paper that his staff were not comfortable performing those ceremonies, and so therefore, rather than discriminate, supposedly, they just quit. They just quit it. Which is the same thing, frankly, that public schools did in Virginia at the time of integration. They said, well, we don't want these African American kids here, so we're just going to close our schools. This city closed its public pools and its golf courses rather than integrate them. And so that's what I see this as, just another example of people who are just backward thinking, not helping.
Good old Jacksonville.
The court orders that integrated the pools and the golf courses, and I'm certain of the golf courses, was signed by one of my heroes, a guy named Brian Simpson, who was a federal court judge here in the 50s and 60s, and then an appellate court judge later. Brian Simpson is in my mind Jacksonville's Atticus Finch.
Yes.
You agree with that?
Absolutely. I didn't know Judge Simpson, but a lot of my early mentors in the law, people like Kent Spooler and Paul Doyle, who were kind of in that ether of Jacksonville jurisprudence back in the 60s and 70s, that they obviously thought very highly of Judge Simpson.
And it fascinates me because you have these people, and Simpson's obviously one of them, who sort of stand out in their era. Simpson, the court orders we're talking about that integrated the golf courses was, I think, in the 50s.
I can't. Yeah, it was certainly before my time.
It was before the big fights in '64 that sort of centered around Simpson's courthouse. The ire of his neighbors must have been intense.
And we look at today, and we don't think twice about it, right? At least I certainly don't think twice about it. Society is integrated, although I'm of the first generation in my family that went to integrated schools. So my perspective on it is probably different than somebody who might have been going to school, prior to the 80s.
That's interesting. Yeah. The school desegregation. We talk about that a little bit in one of the presentations, and I've written a little bit about that. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to go to Simpson because there's not a lot of opportunity. Jennifer will tell you. Jennifer, that's the first time Brian Simpson's come up on the show, maybe.
Yes, and the first time somebody actually knew of his accomplishments and respected him.
Well, he was a huge deal. In '64, all those civil rights trials, orders, judgments go through his courthouse. He keeps the marches going. Which again, at night he had to go home and
worry about his lawn getting set on fire.
He was probably not very popular at Winn-Dixie or at church or places like that.
And he rode the bus to work from his house every day.
Wow.
I've interviewed his son, Brian. I've interviewed Brian Jr. I actually have a piece that's way past being turned in. But on Brian Simpson, which I talk about it being our Atticus Finch. Oh, and Atticus Finch is?
Oh, well, the character from To Kill a Mockingbird, which is banned.
Oh, is it?
It's the top of the book, on the book stack of banned.
Speaking of an ACLU case, the ACLU has sued many school districts over banning of books like To Kill a Mockingbird or
Huckleberry Finn.
Or
I saw Catcher in the Rye on that list. That you sent me the list. I was surprised.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it like campaigning?
It's a lot of fun, although I'll tell you it's been really challenging this year because of COVID. But I like people. I genuinely enjoy people. I get
that sense from you.
I'm an introvert. I am an introvert though, so it can be a little overwhelming. So maybe it hasn't been so bad to be on Zooms and doing virtual things. But I really enjoy people. I love the people of Jacksonville. I love this city and its potential. So it's been really great connecting with folks that I haven't gotten to see in a while, and asking for their vote.
And you got signs. I think I saw one today. Is your picture on the sign?
My picture is not on the sign.
Okay.
I have the voice or a picture. I have a face for radio, so this podcast is fantastic.
Well, I see you on TV. I saw your TV. I like your TV ad.
Yeah, it's got an edge. It's bring it on.
Now, what's it like when you're at home, the TV's on, and suddenly you're on it doing your ad? What's that like? How does that feel to look at yourself, see yourself on television?
It's surreal. I grew up in a two-room, what we used to call a cracker shack on the west side in Maxville. I went to Baldwin schools, public schools here in Duval County. It was not anticipated that I would be in a suit on TV talking about a campaign ever. But what I believe about it, it's surreal to answer the question. But then I think, well, there's other kids who grew up poor in Jacksonville, who are growing up poor in Jacksonville right now. And maybe they're watching that. Maybe they're going to find out someday who Jimmy Midyette was. And maybe they're going to go into public service and make a difference.
I can see you motivating kids. And again, a very admirable statement, but I can see you being a motivator. Jimmy can do it. Everybody can do it. Well, not everybody, but anybody.
It takes a special person to break out of those molds.
It is, and I couldn't do it without, frankly, the support of my parents, who also probably could never. The support of my parents, who probably also never could have possibly imagined that their kid would be doing this.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have a half brother, but otherwise I was raised as an only child.
Okay. So I was wondering the 2 rooms. How many people were there?
Just 3.
So STEM gets a lot of attention: science, technology, engineering, and math. And I was a liberal arts kind of guy. My dad was the president of a liberal arts college. I studied history and economics. Then I, like you, went to law school. I always tell kids, I got a couple pieces of advice, but one of them is, it's not a bad idea to get a law degree.
Right.
And would you agree with that?
Oh man, I don't know. We have so many lawyers in Florida right now. I think that what I tell young people, what I tell them is, look, if you have a burning desire to do something good, to make change, you cannot go wrong with a law degree. But otherwise, there's other degrees you can get. There's nothing wrong with getting a law degree. It's just very expensive right now.
Yeah. Well, it may depend where you're going. UCF's got to be fairly cheap, I would think. I don't even know what they're charging.
I don't know.
I don't know what the Florida State charges.
There's no such thing as a cheap law degree.
There's any such thing these days as a cheap law degree. I mean, by a matter of degree, perhaps, but probably not. I think you're not coming out of law school with less than $150,000 in debt.
Okay. All right. What I usually say to kids is there are other things you can do. And I'm an example. I mean, I'm not practicing law. I'm admitted in New York, but I've never been in a court. I've never really written any documents for anyone other than myself.
You're good at reading the documents.
I am good at reading contracts, yes, and trusts and wills. I'm good at reading all 3 of those.
That's going to be helpful to you in your day job. I would imagine.
Yeah. No, I mean, people often, one of the funny things I find actually with trusts and wills is people have these documents and they don't really know what they say. So that's actually where I come in and go, well, this is what your trust is. It was like, well, why does it say that? I said, well, when you talk to the lawyer, either him or you decided that's what you wanted it to say.
That's right.
And I'll give a longer answer, like, well, probably when you did it, they were trying to save estate taxes, which maybe doesn't matter right this second, but may again in the future.
May.
I'm going to wrap it up. I want to give you a chance here. Why should by the way, I'm not registered in your area. Oh, I had another question first. Equal time. Do I now need to reach out to your opponent, invite him onto the show? Or?
Well, I think you should, because he's a very nice guy.
What's the law?
The law is a little weird. There used to be the equal time doctrine, but I believe it's sunset by the FCC some time ago.
And we're not on real broadcast anymore, so I don't know that does that matter?
Oh, that's a good point. I'm sitting here in the studio thinking, broadcast, but no, in this instance, there is no requirement for equal time.
Okay. All right.
Good to know.
So why should I vote for you?
Well, I think if you were to move to Duval and register, you should vote for me, because I am a person who really cares about the people of the city. I'm not about the special interests. I'm not going to be part of a scheme to sell JEA out from under the city. I'm not going to mix up with those guys. It's a breath of fresh air whenever you vote for me. We're going to go into the clerk of court. We're going to make it accessible to the people. We're going to do all the things that haven't been done for the past 8 years, and we're going to make everybody proud.
A breath of fresh air. You know what?
I agree. And I'm registered in Duval.
Oh, are you?
Yes.
Oh. So maybe you had a chance here to
Yeah,
pick up.
I guess I'm trying here today then.
But don't we all want a breath of fresh air?
Yes, somebody that isn't scared to say, this is who I am and what I stand for. And
Yeah, no, you really.
I'm mixing my beliefs with my job ethics, and this is who I am.
And frankly, the things that you were interested in, they were a breath of fresh air.
Thank you, Scott. I really do appreciate that.
Okay.
Great to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Everyone, this was the Scott Grant Show. Please follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And we'll be back with another exciting guest on our next episode.
Hi, I'm Billy Bussard, and I interviewed the Beatles, which is a much bigger deal than being on the Scott Grant Show.
The Scott Grant Show is brought to you by Standfast Asset Management. We take pride in our disciplined approach to investing.